This might just be the simplest and most effective way to stay organized at work. If you've been around my channel, you've probably seen different versions of this task tracker, but make sure to stick around because I promise you this one's better. So in this task tracker, we have all of our tasks within a single list instead of breaking them up between sections. We have our automatic counter to the left, and we can assign what type of task it is in column B. So you can select anything from unplanned tasks all the way down to follow-up. In column C, we put our task details to remind ourselves what to do later on. Next, we have our task status, and then we have our priority. We have our link in column F, and then we have our task focus, which is brand new, and this shows what area of the business this task is correlated with. And after that, we have all of our timestamps, and this will occur automatically whenever you add a new task, mark it as pending, and mark it as done. In row 7, we have an unplanned task, so I didn't know about it at the beginning of the week. That is top priority, so I'm going to work on that next. I can change the order of the task by clicking on the row and dragging it up, and the number will adjust automatically. And when I change the status to pending, the text will turn green, and when I change it to done, the text will turn gray and be crossed out. And it will also completely disappear from this task list and move entirely to the Done tab. And the tracker is set up for this to happen for all different priority types with the exception of recurring. When we go to the Done tab, you can see that the task that I just completed is at the bottom of the list along with all the details that were in the row when I completed it. And we have a bunch of visualizations breaking down our completed tasks so I can see what focus I had per week as well as per month to see where I'm spending my time. And I can also look at the priority of the tasks that I've completed to see where I'm spending my time for the week as well as the month. And then I can also do it based off of the type of completed task, so whether it was planned or unplanned. So not only are all the completed tasks in one tab, but I can also make sure that I'm spending my time in the right areas. All you have to do to update the tracker each week is just select the next week. And even though the tasks are moved to a new tab, it still counts how many tasks you completed that week. The first thing we'll do is open up a new spreadsheet. And since I have one open already, I'm going to go to File, New Spreadsheet. And I'll rename this as Continuous Task Tracker Example, but you can name it whatever you'd like. I'm going to click and hold on A1, then drag the mouse over to E1 to select the range. And then I'm going to change the background to blue. And I'll also change the font to white. On your screen, you won't see the 3 dots to open up the rest of the toolbar because you're on a bigger screen. I'm just on a tiny screen, so that's why it's there. Next, we're going to do the same exact thing. This time, we're going to select A2 through L2. And I'm going to change the background color to blue, but I'm going to select a slightly lighter blue to differentiate it from the top row. And just like last time, I'm going to make the font white. And if you want to use different colors, feel free. Just make sure that you can read the text. I'm going to click on the line between columns A and B and drag that over to the left to make column A more narrow. Then in cell B1, I'm going to type weekly start date, colon. And I'll click on the line between columns B and C to make that column a little bit wider. In cell C1, we want to add a pop-out calendar. So I'll select C1, go to Data, Data Validation, Add Rule. And I'll use the criteria drop-down to select Is Valid Date, change it to Reject the Input, and hit Done. So now once I exit out of this, you can just double-click on the cell and choose the date directly from the pop-out calendar. I work Monday through Friday, so I always choose Monday for the weekly start date, but do what makes sense for your job and your schedule, just make sure it's consistent. In cell D1, I'm going to type completed, and we'll put a formula in E1, so we're going to skip that for now. I want to change the formatting to be a little bit easier to read, so I'm going to select B1 and change the alignment to right, and then I'll select C1 and change the alignment to left. And now, since the text is right next to each other, it kind of appears as if it's a merged cell, even though it's not. In cell A2, I'm going to put the number sign, since this is where our automatic numbering will go. In B2, I'll put type. Just to the right of that, I'll put task list. In D2, I'll put progress/status. And to the right of that, I'll put priority. And to the right of that, I'll put link. In G2, I'll put task focus. And to the right of that, I'll put value add. And I'm going to scroll over to make the rest of the columns that we need to do visible. Once I press enter, you'll see value add populate in H2. In cell I2, I'm going to put task added. To the right of that, I'll put task started. To the right of that, I'll put task completed. And finally, to the right of that, I'll put week start. And we'll update week start to a formula later on, so it'll be a placeholder for now. The next thing we'll do is click on cell B2, then go to Insert, Dropdown. And a window will appear where you can add the different dropdown options. So we're going to overwrite option 1 and make that planned. And we're going to change that color to the left. And you can make it whatever colors you want. I'm going to put that light green. Then I'll put unplanned and make that orange. I'll click add another item and make that weekly recurring. And I'll make that purple. I'll click add another item again and put monthly recurring. And I'll make that yellow. I'll click add another item again and put unable to start. And I'll make that black. And I'll hit add another item one more time and put follow up. And I'll make that brown. So these are the different task types that we could have. So we have planned, unplanned, weekly recurring, monthly recurring, unable to start, and follow-up. We're going to click on the apply to range and change B3 to B3:B to apply it to the entire range and hit done. And now we're going to do pretty much the same thing for the progress/status category. So we'll select cell D3, go to insert dropdown, and I'll change the range to D3:D to apply it to the full range. I'll overwrite option 1 and change that to done. Then I'll overwrite option 2, put pending and make that yellow. I'll click add another item and put not started and make that blue. And add another item next week and make that red. You can change the colors to whatever you want, and if you want to reorder these, you can by just clicking on the dots to the left. So once you hit done and exit out of the window, you can click on the drop down and you'll see everything that you put here, as well as everything that you put in types, and it should look all correct. Now we're going to set up the drop downs for priority, so I'll click on cell E3, then click insert drop down. And you're probably an expert by now for adding drop downs, so I'm going to go ahead and run through the different options we're going to put. So I'm going to put top, make that red, high, blue, medium, yellow, low, orange, recurring, purple. I'll put unable to start and make that black, and follow up and make that brown. And once again, we need to go up and adjust the range. So instead of E3, it'll be E3:E, then we'll hit done. Now we have one more drop down to add, and that's for task focus. So I'll click on G3, then go to insert drop down. And the options that you put here should be correlated with your position. I personally work in revenue operations, which is why I chose these different options for the task focus, but make sure you put whatever it is that's correlated with what you do for work. And if you want to add colors to each option just like we have in the past, feel free to. I personally just left them gray. And for my position in revenue operations, I chose increased efficiency, improved profitability, enablement, project completion, special project, tool hygiene, and tool configuration. And you want these to be specific enough, but not too specific where you only use it for a couple of tasks and you never use it again. I'll change the range to G3:G, then hit done and exit out of it. First thing we'll do is put a 0 in cell A3 and then hide all of row 3. And in cell A4, we're going to build our automatic counter. So we'll put equals if, open parentheses, is blank, C4, close parentheses, comma, comma. So if C4 is blank, it'll be blank, otherwise we'll continue on. We'll put max, open parentheses, A3, and we're going to anchor that in so it doesn't change. After a colon, we're going to put the offset formula, and this will make it where it always goes through one row above the row that this formula is. So we'll put colon offset, open parentheses, A4, comma, -1, comma 0, close parentheses. We'll put one more close parentheses, then put +1, and that way it adds 1 to whatever the maximum is. So to test this out, we'll put the word test in the task list, and you'll see number 1 automatically populate, and that's because currently the maximum number is 0, which is hidden in row 3. And once again, this is possible because we're taking the maximum number in the range A3 to one row above wherever that formula is. So currently it's pointing to A4, so it's taking it from A3 to A3. But once I drag that formula down, we'll have a bigger range to go through, and it updates dynamically. So if I put test 2 in row 5, if I go to the formula in row 5, now it's going from A3 all the way through A4, since that's one row above A5. So with this formula, every time you add a task to your task list, the number will increase by 1, so you always know how many tasks are in queue. And since the formula is dynamic, if you reorder the rows, it will automatically adjust the formula to match the new position. Alright, so I'm going to drag the formula down to the end of the spreadsheet, hide row 3, and make column C just a little bit bigger. And I want to freeze the top 2 rows, so I'm going to click the bold gray line in the top left corner and drag that down to beneath row 2. So now even if I scroll down, the first 2 rows will be visible. Next, we want to set up the conditional formatting, so I'll select cell C4, go to Format, Conditional Formatting. The first thing we want to do is adjust the range, so instead of C4, we want to put C4:C, then use the drop down to select Custom Formula Is, and we'll put equals D4. And if you made changes to your template and it doesn't match up exactly, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure that the row numbers match. So D4 and C4 match, they have to match this to work. Then we'll put equal and the word pending in quotes. I'm going to make the background white and the text green and bold. And if you have text that matches the criteria in the range, you'll see it update, or you can look at the formatting style to see what it looks like. I'll hit done and then go back into the rule and click add another rule, and this will allow me to duplicate it. So I'll change pending to done, change the font from green to gray, remove the bold and put a strike through. After hitting done, I'll go back into the rule. You can choose either, but I'm going to go into the one that's for done. Hit add another rule, then change the word done to next week, and change the font from gray to red. Then I'll hit done. Now we're all set, so we can exit out of the editor, and you can test it out to make sure that everything is flowing through properly. So every option should change the color with the exception of not started, which is black. Now we're going to set up the automation. So go to my profile, then click on beacons, say open anyway, and go to AppScript-codes. And this will bring up my GitHub that has all the different AppScript codes. What we want is the continuous task tracker. If you don't see it, just try to expand it and you should see it. So we'll click into continuous task tracker, then we'll click copy raw file. And once that's copied, we can go back to our spreadsheet, then go to extensions, AppScript. And if you've never heard of AppScript before, don't worry, you don't need to know how this works to be able to add the code. So first we'll delete everything that's there, and then we'll paste all the code that we copied from the GitHub. And you should see the lines and everything for it to be formatted properly. We'll go ahead and rename the project to timestamp and move row. And realistically, you can rename this to whatever you want. We'll click rename, and then we'll save project and run. Now after the code runs, you'll see down here in the execution log a couple of error messages that pop up. But don't worry, even if you see the error messages, the automation will still work. Now let's go back to our spreadsheet to test this out. But before we do, we need to add one more tab. So we'll add a new tab by pressing the plus in the bottom left-hand corner and rename that tab done. And if you change the option so it doesn't say done, but it says something else like completed or something along those lines, make sure you change in the code where it says done, change that to whatever you put, and rename the done tab to match. When I change the status to done, you'll see that the task disappears from the task list altogether. And when I go to the done tab, you'll see it right there. Now to make sure everything is working correctly, I'm going to go ahead and put not started, then pending. I'll put a name for the task list. I'll add the type, so I'll put unplanned. Priority, I'll put high. And then over to the right, we can see the task focus, and I'll pick one of these. And you can see that the task timestamps are off here to the right. And the timestamp for task completed is missing since we have not marked it as done yet. Now before we complete this task, we need to embed a formula into the header for week start. So in cell L2, we'll put equals, open brace, the words week start in quotes, a semicolon, array formula, open parentheses. Then we'll put if, open parentheses, is blank, open parentheses, C3:C, close parentheses, comma, comma, C1, and anchor that in. So with this, if the row in column C is blank, then it will be blank. Otherwise, it's going to return the value of C1. And cell C1 is our start date, and right now it's formatted as a number. So we're going to highlight the entire row, go to 1, 2, 3, and format it as a date. So right now you see February 19th since that's what's selected. If we change the weekly start date to February 26th instead, it will update automatically. And this is important to update every week at the start of each week. That way the tasks are reflected as completing in the right time frame. All right, so now back to our tasks. I'm going to add another task that's recurring. That way we can show you the difference between the two. And I'm going to put a task focus, then we'll be done with it. All right, so right now a timestamp is added for task added as well as task started since the top one is pending. And if we change the status from pending to done for the top task, it will completely disappear from this list and go straight to that done tab. But before it does, it will calculate that task completed timestamp. So that's how we keep track of what tasks were completed each week. You can see in column A we have a reference error, and that's because it's a formula that flows through. We can go ahead and minimize that since we don't really need it. Now if I change the status to pending and then done for this recurring task, you'll see that it will be marked as done, but it will not disappear. And that's because we don't want to keep sending all of our recurring tasks to the done tab, but the timestamps do appear. Now you probably noticed that we're missing the headers on the done tab, so I'm going to copy the headers from B2 to L2, then go to our done tab, insert one row above row 1, and then paste it in B1. And in cell 1, we have a reference error, and that's because it's trying to paste a formula. We don't need the formula anymore, so we can just type weekly start instead. And I want to freeze that top row, so I'm going to drag the bold gray line in the top left corner to beneath row 1, and now it's frozen. The first thing we're going to do is rename sheet 1. So we'll right click on sheet 1, select rename, and rename that task list. And now we need to build the formula to count how many completed tasks we've done. So in E1, we're going to type equals count ifs, open parentheses, go to our done tab and select all of column K. After a comma, we'll put greater than or equal to within quotes, an ampersand, and then select C1 in the task list. So this will count anything where the completed date is greater than or equal to the start date. Now after a comma, we're going to go back to the done tab and select column K again, put a comma, then quote less than or equal to quote, an ampersand, then we're going to go back to the task list, put open parentheses, select C1 plus 6, then close parentheses. And I know it says 7, it should actually be 6 so you don't overlap into the new week. So what this is doing is looking at the done tab, and it's looking at all the timestamps in column K, And if that timestamp is greater than or equal to the start date and less than 6 days from that start date, it will count that as completed. All right, so the next thing we want to do is add a new tab. So I'll click the plus in the bottom left-hand corner, then right-click on that tab and click Rename. And we want to rename that as Visualizations Worksheet. Now we're going to go back to the Done tab, and we're going to select B1 through L1 and all the way down through the end of the rows. In the menu bar, we'll select Insert, then go to Pivot Table, select Existing Sheet, click the 4 little boxes, then go to our Visualization Worksheet, and click A1, then hit OK, and Create. So now we have our Pivot Table editor, and pivot tables are pretty easy to set up. All you have to do is just drag and drop the column to their correlated area and tweak it from there. So I'm going to move Task Focus to the rows, Weekly Start to the columns, Task List to values, and then Weekly Start to filters as well. I'll click into the filter and then filter by condition. I'm going to put greater than, then put a 0. Make sure everything is selected, then hit OK. And now I can exit out of the editor. So you can see here we have our standard pivot table. I actually don't want to see the total, so I'm going to uncheck Show Totals from both the column and the row, and now we're good to go. I'm going to copy this pivot table, then paste it in cell A16, and then right-click on the date, click Create Pivot Group, and put Year-Month. So now everything is summarized by the month instead of the week. If you don't have a date there, go ahead and add a date to your task list first. I'm going to copy and paste that pivot table to A30, and then change the rows from Task Focus to Priority, and then I'm going to remove the grouping. Then I'll copy that pivot table and paste it in A37, then group the date back to Year-Month. And again, I don't want to show totals in either of these. I'm going to copy the pivot table from A30 and paste it in A47. I'll drag Type to Rows and delete Priority, and remove Show Totals. Then I'll copy that pivot table and paste it in A56, and I'm just going to simply right-click and group the dates by year and month again. And the reason why we're adding a buffer between the pivot tables is to allow for future values so they don't overlap with different pivot tables. So now we're going to test it out. So I'll go back to our task list. I'll put Unplanned for the type, Not Started, Top, then select a random task focus. So now I'll go through the cycle. So I'll select Pending, and then I'll select Done. And once I select Done, it will automatically be removed from this list and move straight to that Done tab. And the second it's reflected in the Done tab, it will automatically be reflected in the pivot tables as well, as you can see here. Now, as I mentioned, it's super important to update the weekly start date every week. Not only will it affect the counter, but it will also reflect where your completed tasks land. So for example, I'm going to update the tracker so it's February 26, 2024, then fill out all my task information. I'll change the status to pending and then done. And then once it's removed, it will go to the Done tab, and then it will be reflected in the Visualizations tab. But as you can see, instead of it being counted for February 19th, it's counted for February 26th instead. But since it's the same month, it will still be counted in February. Next, we're going to select A1 through, say, A11 just to account for future data, and go all the way through the end of the columns. And we're going to select Insert Chart. Then I'm going to copy that chart, add a new tab, right-click, name it Visualizations, and then I'm going to paste that chart. And then I'm going to click on it and drag it over to where I want it to be. I'll make this zoom a little bit smaller, that way you can see it all on one screen for this video. Back on the Visualizations worksheet, I'm going to delete the extra chart. Go back to Visualizations and click on the 3 dots in the top right corner of the chart. And under X-axis, I'm going to select Weekly Start instead. I'm going to select Switch Rows and Columns, use column A as headers, and use row 2 as labels. Under Series, I'm going to click Enablement, Improve Profitability, and Tool Hygiene. And it should update automatically, but in case it doesn't the first time you use a new focus, just make sure it's added to the series. We'll select the drop-down under Chart Type and select Stacked Column Chart instead, and then exit out of the editor. So now you can see instead of having things next to each other, we have everything stacked on top. I'm going to go back into the editor and then hit Customize. Under Chart Title, I'll put Task Focus Completed. I'll use the drop-down to select Chart Subtitle and put By Week, then Horizontal Axis Title and put Week Completed, then Vertical Axis Title and put Number Completed. So now once I exit out of the editor, you can see that things are a little bit easier to read. I don't think I want the legend to be on the top, so I'm going to go to Customize, and then I'm going to go to Legend, Position instead of Auto. I'm going to put it on the right side instead. So now it's a little bit easier to read for me. And this is especially important as we add more focuses. I'm going to copy that chart and then paste it beneath. Then I'm going to double click on the words by week and change week to month. So now you can see that instead of it being Task Focus Completed by Week, it says Task Focus Completed by Month. I'm going to go back into the editor and I'm going to change the data range. So I will click on the 4 boxes, delete the data range that's currently there. Then back on our visualization worksheet tab, I'm going to start on A16 and go all the way through the end of the column, leaving a few buffer rows beneath for future values. Then hit OK. So since we copy and pasted the chart, we're pretty much good on the format. All we need to do is go to Customize, Chart and Axis Title, Horizontal Axis Title, and change week to month. So now we can exit out of the editor, and you can see that the top chart is broken up by week, and the bottom chart is broken up by month. Now to minimize duplicate work, I'm going to click on the top chart, scroll to the right a little bit, I'm going to paste that. Now we're going to click on the 3 dots in the top right corner, and click Edit Chart. Click on the 4 boxes to adjust the data range, delete the current data range. Now back in the Visualizations Worksheet tab, I want to select the next pivot table. So I'm going to go A30 all the way through Z35 and then hit OK. And once again, everything should be good to go since you duplicated the original formatting from the chart. All we need to do is go to Customize, Chart Title, and change Task Focus to Task Priority. So it'll be Task Priority Completed. And once we exit out of the editor, you can see that the breakdown is now based on the task priority instead of the task focus. Now to keep things simple, I'm going to click on the monthly version of the task focus chart. I'll move the task priority completed out of the way, then paste it underneath. And after repositioning this chart to make it look a little bit more pleasing to the eye, I'm going to click on the 3 dots, select Edit Chart, click on the 4 boxes again, and delete the current range. Back on the Visualizations Worksheet tab, we're going to select the next pivot table. So I'm going to go A37 through Z43 and hit OK. And once again, everything should be good. We'll also need to go to Customize, Chart and Axis Title, and change the word Focus to Priority to make the title Task Priority Completed. So now everything is good to go for the task priority. So I'm going to exit out of the editor. And you can see up top, we have it broken up by week. And on bottom, we have it broken up by month, just like the other one. So now we're going to do the same exact thing that we did before. But this time, instead of changing it to task priority, we're changing it to type. So I'm going to copy the weekly version of the task priority and paste it just to the right. Then click on Edit, go to those 4 dots and delete the current range. Go back to the Visualizations Worksheet. And now we need to select the next pivot table. So I'll start in A47 and go down to Z54, then hit OK. Then we'll go to Customize, Chart and Axis Title. This time we're deleting both task and priority and putting type instead. So now we have the type broken up by week. And we're going to do the same exact thing for the month. So I'll copy on the month task priority completed chart and then paste it just to the right. After lining it up to make it visually appealing, I'm going to go back into the editor, click the 4 little boxes and delete the data range, go to the Visualizations Worksheet, and then this time we're going to select cells A56 through Z63. And yep, you guessed it, we need to go to Customize, Chart Title, and replace Task Priority with Type. So now we're all set up for all of our charts. On the left side, we have our task focus broken up by week and month. In the middle, we have our task priority broken up by week and month. And then just to the right, we have our type broken up by week and month. And the task should be sized where you can see all 6 on one screen without having to scroll. Now I'm going to go back to my task list and add a new task. That way you can see this in action. And with the task details, I'm just going to speed through this and add some random values so we can get going to show this in action. I'm going to change it to pending, and then I'm going to change it to done. It will disappear from this list and go into our done tab. Once the task is reflected in the done tab, it will automatically update the pivot tables to reflect the new value, and it will automatically update the visualizations as well. So after the initial setup, it requires 0 upkeep to maintain these visualizations, and you can see exactly what type of task you're focusing on. So you can see right here, follow-up was the new status and the new type, so they're all reflected accurately. Now the Visualizations tab is really just a flow through for the charts, so we can hide that sheet and now just have the task list, the done, and the visualizations. So now all you have to do is complete your task and let the spreadsheet do the rest. Whenever a task is added to my workload throughout the week, I'll add the task to my tracker. The type will be unplanned since I didn't know about the task at the beginning of the week. Under task list, I'll put a quick note to remind myself what to do and set the status to not started. After assigning the task priority, I'll assign the task focus, and the task focus is what area of the job this task is related to. When I'm ready for the next task, I'll look at my priority, and then I'll drag the highest priority up to just below recurring, and you'll see the numbers shift automatically. When I start the task, I'll change the status to pending, and the text will turn green, and it will also add a timestamp under task started. When the task is completed, I'll change the status to done, and the text will turn gray and crossed out, then disappear completely from this list. It will automatically add it to the bottom of my Done tab where it shows everything that I've completed, but beforehand it will add a timestamp for when the task was completed. And it will also increase the number of my completed tasks this week by 1. In the Visualizations tab, you can see exactly where you're spending time each week. So I can see my task focus completed by week and month. I can also see the task priority broken up by week and month, and the type of task broken up by week and month. And having these visualizations allow me to make sure that I'm focusing on the right areas at the right time. Updating the tracker each week is super simple. All you have to do is go to the current week tab and double click on the date and change it to the next week, and then change any recurring tasks that were done to not started, and also change any unplanned tasks to planned tasks. I'm not usually that organized, but with this task tracker, I became one of the most organized people in my company. I hope you like it and follow Sheets by Olin for more.